Greenwitch, Day 5. Simon said, "We heard Rufus barking outside the door then, so Barney and I both moved to get him. And the dark man jumped up and snapped his fingers once, click, right by our faces. I saw Barney's eyes go sort of vague, and he moved forwards very slowly and opened the door as if he were sleepwalking. So I copied whatever he did, because obviously I had to take terrific care the painter didn't suspect I could remember what had happened. Rufus had gone, run away. Barney blinked a bit and shook his head, and almost at once he was talking as if we had just got there a moment or two before, like going back in time, so I tried to do the same. You didn't do too well, Barney said. You looked awful. I thought you were going to be sick. What happened to the Grail? Jane said. I suppose he still got it. I wouldn't know, said Barney. I don't remember seeing it. I do remember him giving back my drawing, though. Look. He waved it at Merriman, who took it and twirled it absently in his fingers as he watched Simon. Simon, Jane said, why did the forgetting work on Barney and not you? It was the drinks, Simon said. This really sounds stupid, but it must have been. We drank some orange soda, and there must have been a kind of potion in it. Clumsy, Merriman said. Old-fashioned. Interesting. He looked at Will, and Will looked at him, and their eyes became opaque. But the orange was sealed in the cans, Barney said incredulously. That's the only reason we drank it, because he couldn't have put anything in it. And anyway, you didn't even open yours. The spell of mana, Will Stanton said very low to Merriman, and the spell of wreck, and the spell of lure. No, Barney, Simon said. You actually went and got those drinks twice. Only the first time was one of the things you've forgotten. And though I didn't have any the second time, I did pretend to drink some the first time. So we thought it worked on us both, Will said to Merriman. There is no more time. We must go now at once. Simon, Jane, and Barney stared at him. There was crisp, unboyish decision in his voice. Merriman nodded, his hawk's face grim and taut. He said unfathomably to Captain Tom's, Take care of them. He turned his cold, grim face to Simon and said, You are sure that, at the last, the voice that came from Barney said, Before the Greenwitch departs to the great deeps? Yes, said Simon, nervously. Then it is still here, Will said. And to the children's bewilderment, he and Merriman turned and ran towards the end of the headland and the sea beyond. With the swift ease of animals they ran, the long, lean man and the sturdy boy, in urgent loping running that took away their age and all sense of familiarity in their appearance. Faster, faster, faster. And at the rocks ending the headland, they did not pause, but went on. Will leapt up, light-footed, to the crest of the Kamar head and cast himself outwards into the air, into the empty sky, arms spread wide, lying on the wind like a bird, and after him went Merriman, his white hair flying like a heron's crest. For an instant the two dark, spread-eagled figures seemed to hang in the sky. Then, with a slowness as if time held its breath, they curved downwards and were gone. Jane screamed. Simon said, choking with horror, They'll be killed! They'll be killed! Captain Tom's turned to them, his rosy face stern. He did not lean on a stick. He seemed taller than before. He pointed one arm straight at them with 5 fingers spread wide. Forget, he said, forget. They stood poised for a moment, caught out awareness, and compassionately he watched the terror drain out of their faces to leave them empty, expressionless. He said gently, The mission for all of us is to keep the man of the dark from the Greenwitch. Will and your great-uncle have gone among the fishermen. One way, we 4 have another way to watch. From your cottage and the Grey House, know this. Now, have no fear. Slowly he lowered his arm, and the puppets, and like puppets, the children came back to life. We'd better get going then, Simon said. Come on, Jane. I go with you, Captain, right? Barney said. I'll give you some breakfast, Captain Tom said, twinkling at him, leaning on his cane. It's past time. Chapter 7. Like diving birds, they flashed into the water, leaving no ripple in the great Atlantic swells. Down through the green waves, the dim green light. So they breathed as fishes breathe, yet they flickered through the water like bars of light with a speed no fish could ever attain. Miles away in fathoms deep they sped on toward the distant deeps. The sea was full of noises, hissing and groaning, clicking, with great full sides of thumps, like cannon fire as schools of big startled fish sped out of their way. The water grew warmer, jade green, translucent. Glancing down, Will saw far below him the last signs of an old wreck. Only stumps remained of the masts and the raised decks, all eaten away by shipworms. From the mounted sand sifting over the hull, an ancient cannon jutted, lumping with coral, and 2 white skulls grinned up at Will. Killed by pirates, perhaps, he thought, destroyed, like too many men, neither by the dark nor the light, but by their own kind. Porpoises played above their heads. Great gray sharks cruised and turned, glancing curiously down as the 2 old ones flashed by. Down and down they went, to the twilight zone. that dim-lit layer of the ocean where only a little of the day can reach, where all the fish, long slender fish with great mouths, strange flattened fish with telescopic eyes, glowed with a cold light of their own. Then they were down in the deep sea, that covers more of the surface of the earth than any land or grass or tree, mountain or desert, in the cold dark where no normal man may see or survive. This was the region of fear and treachery, where every fish ate every other fish, where life was only made of fierce attack and the terror of desperate flight. Will saw huge toad-like fish with bright-tipped fishing lines curving up from their backs to hang cruelly, alluring over wide mouths bristling with teeth. He saw a dreadful creature that seemed all mouth, a vast mouth like a funnel with a lid, and a puny body dwindling into a long whiplash tail. Beside it, the body of another began to swell horribly, as a big fish, struggling, disappeared inside the trap-like mouth. Will shuddered. No light, he said to Merriman, as they flashed onwards. No joy in anything. Nothing but fear. This is not the world of men, Merriman said. It is Tethys' world. Even in the darkest sea, they knew they were observed and escorted all the way by subjects of Tethys invisible even to an old one's eye. News came to the Lady of the Sea long, long before anyone might approach. She had her own ways, older than the land, older than the old ones. Older than all men, she ruled her kingdom of waves as she had since the world began, alone, absolute. They came to a great crack in the bed of the sea, an abyss deeper than all the ocean deeps. A fine red mud covered the ocean floor, though they had left all vestige of daylight long behind, miles above their heads. Yet there was light of another kind in the black water, by which they could see as the creatures of the deep water saw. Eyes watched them from the darkness, from cracks and crevices. They were reaching the place for which they were bound. As Will and Merriman slowed their rushing course, there in the lost places of the ocean they could sense all these watchers around them, but slowly, vaguely, as if in a dream. And when at last the sea brought them to Tethys, they could not see her at all. She was a presence merely. She was the sea itself, and they spoke to her reverently in the old speech. Welcome, said Tethys to them out of the darkness of the deeps of her sea. Welcome to you, old ones of the earth. I have seen none of your kind for some little time now, for some 15 centuries or so. And then it was I, Merriman said, smiling. And then indeed it was you, Hawk, she said, and one other, greater, with you, but this is not he, I think. I am new on the earth, madame, but I bring you my deep respect, said Will. Ah, Tethys said, ah, and her sigh was the sighing of the sea. Hawk, she said then, why have you come again, this hard voyaging? To beg a favor, lady, Merriman said. Of course, she said, it is always so. And to bring a gift, he said. Ah! There was a slight stirring in the shadows of the deep, like a gentle swell on the sea. Will turned his head to Merriman in surprise. He had not known of any gift-bringing, though he realized now how proper it must be. Merriman drew from his sleeve a rolled piece of paper, a glimmering cylinder in the gloom. He unrolled it, and Will saw that it was Barney's drawing of Trewisick. He peered closer, curious, and saw a pen and ink sketch. Rough but lively, the background of harbor and houses was no more than lightly outlined, and Barney had given all his attention to a detailed drawing in the foreground of a single fishing boat in a patch of rippled sea. He had even drawn in the name on the boat's stern. She was called the White Lady. Merriman held the drawing at arm's length and released it into the sea. Instantly it vanished into the shadow. There was a pause, then a soft laugh from Tethys. She sounded pleased. So the fishermen do not forget, she said. Even after so long, some do not forget. The power of the sea will never change, Will said softly. Even men recognize that. And these are islanders. And these are islanders, Tethys played with the words, and they are my people, if any are. They do as they have always done, Merriman said. They go out to the sea for fish at the going down of the sun, and with the dawn they return again. And once every year, when the spring is full and summer lies ahead, they make for you, for the White Lady, a green figure of branches and leaves, and cast it down as a gift. The Greenwitch, Tethys said. It has been born again already. This is the season. It will be here soon. A coldness came into the voice that filtered from the shadows. What is this favor, you ask, Hawk? The Greenwitch is mine. The Greenwitch has always been yours and always will. But because its understanding is not as great as your own, it has made the mistake of taking into its possession something that belongs to the light. That has nothing to do with me, Tethys said. A faint light seemed to glimmer from the blue-black shadow in which she was hidden, and all around them lights began to glow and flash from the fish and sea creatures waiting there, watching. Will saw the dangling bait stars over great gaping mouths, strings of round lights like portholes running the length of strange, slender fish. In the far distance he saw an odd cluster of lights of different colors that seemed to belong to some bigger creature hidden in the shadow. He shivered, fearful of this alien element in which, by enchantment, they briefly breathed and swam. The wild magic has neither allies nor enemies, Merriman said coldly. This you know. If you may not help us, yet it is not right for you to hinder us either. For in doing so, you give aid to the dark, and if the Greenwitch keeps that which it has found, the dark will be very much strengthened. Poor argument, Tethys said. You mean simply that the light will then fail to gain an advantage. But I am not permitted to help either light or dark to gain any advantage. You speak deviously, my friend. The White Lady sees everything, Merriman said, with a soft, sad humility in his tone that startled Will, until he realized that it was no more than a delicate reminder of their gift. Ha! There was a flicker of amusement in the voice of the shadow. We will have a bargain, old ones, Tethys said. You may in my name try to persuade the Greenwitch to give up this something that is of such value to you, before the creature comes to the depths. This is a matter between it and you. I shall not interfere, and the dark may not interfere either, in my realm. Thank you, madame, Will said, in quick delight. But the voice went on, without pause. This shall be only until the Greenwitch turns to come to the deep sea, as it always comes each year to its proper home, to me, and after that time, old ones, anything that is in its possession is lost to you. You may not follow. None may follow. You may not return here, then even by the spell which brings you here today. Should the Greenwitch choose to bring your secret down to the deeps, then in the deeps forever it shall remain. Merriman made as if to speak again, but the voice from the darkness was cold. That is all. Go now. Madame, Merriman said. Go! Rage filled the voice of Tethys suddenly. There was a great flashing and roaring in the depths all round them. Strong currents rose, tugging at their limbs. Fish and eels darted wildly round them in all directions, and out of the distant shadow a great shape came. It was the dark thing that carried within it the bright lights that Will had seen. Nearer and nearer they came, looming larger and larger, white and purple and green, glaring out of a swelling black mass as high as a house. And Will saw with chill horror that the thing was a giant squid, one of the great monsters of the deep, huge and terrible. Each of its wavering, suckered tentacles was many times longer than its own height. He knew that it could move as fast as lightning, and that the tearing bite of its dreadful beak-like mouth could have annihilated either of them in a single instant. Fearful, he groped for a spell to destroy it. No, said Merriman instantly into his mind, nothing will harm us here. Whatever the danger may seem, the Lady of the Sea is, I think, merely encouraging us to leave. He swept a low, exaggerated bow to the shadows of the deep. Our thanks and our homage, lady, he called in a strong, clear voice, and then with Will beside him he swept up and away, past the looming black shape of the huge squid, away to the great open green ocean, the way that they had come. We must go to the Greenwitch, he said to Will. There is no time to lose. If there are the two of us, Will cried to him as they swept along, and we work on the Greenwitch the spell of mana and the spell of wreck and the spell of lure, will it give up the manuscript to us? That must come afterwards, called Merriman. But those spells will command it to listen and hear, for only they harness the magic with which the Greenwitch was made. They flashed through the sea like bars of light, out of the deep cold, up to the tropic warmth, back to the cold waters of Cornwall. But when they came to the place beneath the waves beating their long swells against Kamar Head, the Greenwitch was not there. No sign remained. It had gone. Chapter 8. When Simon and Jane arrived back at the cottage, they found Fran Stanton setting out plates on the dining room table. Hi, she said. Want some lunch? Mrs. Penhallow had to leave, but she made some great-looking Cornish pasties. I can smell them, Simon said hungrily. Lovely, said Jane. Did you have a good time? Where you went? We didn't go far, Mrs. Stanton said. St. Austell, round there. Clay pits and factories and that sort of thing. She wrinkled her friendly face. Still, after all, that's what Bill came over for, and there's a real magic about those big white clay pyramids, and the pools so quiet at the bottom of them. Such green water. Are you having fun? What's everyone doing? Will and Great Uncle Mary went for a walk. Barney's over at the Grey House with Captain Tom's. We're supposed to go there, too, this afternoon. The captain wants us all to stay for supper, Jane said, boldly improvising. That is, if you don't mind. Perfect, Fran Stanton said. Bill and I shan't be eating here anyway. I left him seeing some guy near St. Austell, and I have to go back tonight to pick him up. This afternoon I came back just to be lazy. Let's eat, and you can tell me all about the Greenwitch deal I wasn't allowed to watch, Jane. So Jane, with some difficulty, gave a description of the making the Greenwitch as a gay all-night party, an outing for the local girls, while Simon wolfed down Cornish pasties and tried not to catch her eye. Mrs. Stanton listened happily, shaking her blonde head in admiration. It's just wonderful the way these old customs are kept up, she said, and I think it's great they wouldn't let a foreigner watch. So many of our Indians back home, they let the white men in to watch their native dances, and before you know it, the whole thing's just a tourist trap. I'm glad you weren't offended, Jane said. We weren't afraid. Oh, no, 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 said Mrs. Stanton. Why, I've already got enough material to give a great paper on this trip to my travel group back home. We have this club, you see. It meets once a month, and at each meeting someone gives a little talk with slides on somewhere she's been. This is the first time, she added a trifle wistfully, I shall have had anywhere unusual to talk about, except Jamaica, and everyone else has been there, too. Afterwards, Jane said to Simon, as they scrambled down towards the harbor, she's rather sweet, really. I'm glad she'll have us to talk about to her club. The natives and their quaint old customs, Simon said. Come on, you aren't even a native. You're one of the foreigners from London, and I'm not so much outside of it all, as she says. Not her fault. She just comes from such a long way away, she isn't plugged in. Like all those people who go to the museum and look at the Grail and say, oh, how wonderful, without the least idea of what it really is. You mean people who used to look at it when it was there? Oh, Lord, yes. Well, anyway, said Jane, we'd be the same as Mrs. Stanton if we were in her country. Of course we would. That's not the point. They bickered amiably as they crossed the quay and started up the hill towards the gray house. Pausing to get her breath, Jane looked back the way they had come. All at once she clutched the wall beside her and stood there, staring. Simon! What is it? Look! Down in the harbor, in the very center of the quay, was the painter, the man of the dark. He sat on a folding stool before an easel, with a knapsack open on the ground beside him, and he was painting. There was no urgency in his movements. He sat there tranquil and unhurried, dabbing at the canvas. Two visitors paused behind him to watch. He paid them no attention, but he went serenely on with his work. Just sitting there, Simon said, astounded. It's a trick. It must be. Perhaps he has an accomplice, someone off doing things for him while he attracts our attention. Simon said slowly. There was no sign of anyone else having been in the caravan, and the farm looked as if it had been empty for years. Let's go and tell the captain. But there's no need to tell him. At the gray house, they found Barney perched in a small high room overlooking the harbor, studying the painter through Captain Tom's largest telescope. The old man himself, having let them in, remained below. This foot of mine, he said ruefully, isn't too grand at climbing up and down stairs. But I bet you can see as much with his eyes shut, if he wanted to, as I can through this thing, Barney said, squinting down the telescope with one eye closed and his face screwed up. He's special, you know, just like Mary. They're the same kind. Well, what kind is that, I wonder, Jane said thoughtfully. Who knows, Barney said, stretching. A weird kind, a super kind, the kind that belongs to the light. Whatever that is. Yes, whatever that is. Hey, Jane, look at this. Simon was bending to the eyepiece of the telescope. It's fantastic, like being right on top of him. You can practically count his eyelashes. I've been staring at that face so long I could draw it from memory, Barney said. Simon was glued to the lens, entranced. It was as good as being able to hear anything he says. You might even be able to lip read. You can see every single change of expression. That's right, Barney said. He looked casually out of the window, breathed on the pane, drew a little face in the misted patch of glass, and then rubbed it out again. The view of his face is terrific. The only trouble is, there's no view of his painting at all. Jane had taken her turn at the telescope now. She gazed nervously at the face caught out of the distance by the powerful lens, a dark, broad face, grim with concentration, framed by the long, unruly hair. Well, yes, from this angle, of course. You're just looking back at the back of the easel, looking down at his face over the top of the canvas. But that's not important, is it? It is if you're an artist, like Barney, Simon said. He clasped his head, striking an extravagant, artistic pose. Ha ha, said Barney with a heavy patience. It's not just that. I thought the picture might be important. Why? I don't know. Captain Thomas did ask me what he was painting. What did he say when you said you couldn't see? He didn't say anything. Well then, your painter doesn't change his expression one bit, does he? Jane was still peering. Just sits there, glaring at the canvas. Funny. Not very funny, Simon said. He's a glaring sort of man. No, I mean it's funny he doesn't look anywhere else. If he You watch Mother when she's painting a landscape. You can see her eyes going up and down all the time, flickering, from whatever it is she's painting, down to the picture and then back again. But he's not doing that at all. Let me have another look. Barney edged her aside and stared eagerly into the lens, grabbing his blond forelock out of the way. You know, you're right. Why didn't I notice that? He thumped his knee with his fist. I still don't see what there is to get excited about, Simon said mildly. Well, perhaps it's nothing, but let's go and tell Captain Tom's anyway. They clattered down 3 flights of stairs and into the book-lined living room at the front of the house. Rufus stood up and waved his tail at them. Captain Tom's was standing beside one of the bookcases, gazing at a small book open in his hands. He looked up as they rushed to him, and he closed the book. What news, citizens? He said. Barney said, he's still sitting there painting, but Jane just noticed something. He's not painting from life. He just looks at the canvas without even glancing at anything else at all. So he might just as well be painting in his caravan as painting here, said Simon, his mind now in gear. So he can't really be here to paint. He must be here for some other reason. That may be quite right, Captain Tom said. He parted the books on the nearest shelf carefully and slipped his volume back. And then again, it may not be quite right. What do you mean? The painting and the other reason may be one and the same thing. The only trouble is, Captain Tom stared up at his books as if willing them to speak. I can't for the life of me work out what that thing is all